All right, guys, good morning to everybody and welcome into the Auburn pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm your host, Simone Eli, alongside Tom Green as we are chatting the Auburn Tigers, week 2 of the college football season. Kickoff today at 6:30 against San Jose State on the Plains. Tom, welcome into the show. When you look at this game from an overview standpoint, what are your general thoughts going into week 2 of the season if you're the Auburn Tigers?
Well, this should be another pretty easy win for Auburn before the schedule really picks up next week with Penn State. It's going to be an opportunity for them to kind of work on some areas that they wanted to improve on after week 1. Brian Harsin mentioned, some of the younger guys especially, probably had some jitters that first week going out there for the first time. So probably expects to see a lot more of those young guys contribute a little bit more in the game plan this week as they kind of acclimate them and get them comfortable as things start to ramp up with Penn State and then the start of SEC play after that.
No doubt about it. Auburn fans, we're excited to see the Tigers go out there and execute offensively. There's been years past where it seemed like that was a struggle, and it felt like some things were working for the Tigers last week. Obviously, a glimmer of hope, a glimmer of excitement, so to speak, and finally seeing Brian Harsin's offensive mind kind of come together when it comes to what we see from the quarterback system right now. TJ Finley going to get the start this week. He was obviously got the start the season a week ago. What do you think TJ Finley's strengths are right now, Tom? And where do you feel like he needs to improve the most going into week 2 of the season?
Well, he showed really good command of the offense, especially early on in the game. And that's one of the things that Brian Harsin and offensive coordinator Eric Kiesau really lauded him for throughout the preseason. And it's really what won him the starting job. I was pretty impressed with him, for much of the first half, really. He completed 8 of his first 9 passes for 100 yards and a touchdown, had some good throws in there, was making good decisions. Then he kind of stumbled a little bit with his last 5 attempts, had 2 interceptions there. And, he acknowledged after the game exactly what the issues were on those plays. And then Brian Harsin kind of reiterated that on Monday. One was just he tried to force it into a tight window to try to hit Coy Moore on a 3rd down play. And the other one was just bad mechanics, throwing off his back foot on a deep ball intended for Shedrick Jackson. Mistakes are going to happen. Obviously, those 2 interceptions are more than TJ had in, his 3 starts and 6 other appearances last season. But, I don't think that's going to be something that, fans should harp on too much. TJ is not going to get pulled as a starter just because he had a couple mistakes in the first game, because he looked really good for most of his start.
In your opinion, Tom, I don't want to talk entirely down the road future, but in the immediate future, we're going to talk about Robbie Ashford in just a moment. But do you feel like TJ Finley is on a leash, so to speak? I don't want to say is this his job to lose, but obviously the pressure is on the guy who is in the number 1 spot. And I think he feels that, he knows that. Do they continue with the dual quarterback system? We'll get to that in a moment as well. But is there added pressure on TJ Finley to go out and to execute? Because fans are excited about Robbie Ashford. They're excited about what, the thrill, maybe, so to speak, that we saw from Ashford and his athleticism in week 1.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be pressure on the starting quarterback when you have a backup quarterback look, everybody knows that the backup quarterback is the most popular guy on campus always, because there's always the allure of potential and what he could bring to the table. We saw some of that with Robbie Ashford. It certainly didn't help with that pressure that, Robbie Ashford came out and had such an impressive debut in his, first time ever playing after, riding the bench for 2 seasons at Oregon. He completed 4 of 7 passes for 100 yards, really showed off with his legs. He had probably the two or three best plays offensively in that game that weren't from Tank Bigsby. He had that 56-yard pass to Javarius Johnson. He had that 49-yard run that got Auburn out of the shadow of its own end zone. And then he had that really impressive block where he sprinted downfield and just opened things up a little bit for Tank Bigsby on his run after that lengthy weather delay. So I think the combination of Robbie Ashford looking really impressive and the fact that the backup quarterback is always going to be everybody's favorite player kind of puts a little bit more pressure on TJ. But, he's handled things very well since he arrived at Auburn. And I don't think that it's going to impact him. He admitted after the game last week, when he first saw that, Robbie was going to be incorporating the game plan, the competitive side of him was like, wait a minute, I want to be the guy that gets these reps.
Sure.
But when he realized that, this is going to help the team. TJ hasn't hesitated to put the team first. And I think him and Robbie both understand that, right now the best path forward for this team is these two guys complementing each other at the quarterback position.
I think that's a good way to put it. Complimenting rather maybe than competing is the right word to use there, depending on how Brian Harsin wants to move forward. And if it works when it comes to chemistry in the locker room, when it comes to who guys look to when they for a leader, if they can look to both guys, obviously that can only be beneficial. Shout out to Scott Odom, always tuning in every Saturday morning for the Auburn pregame show, brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. We appreciate your comments. Scott said that he feels like TJ Finley is on a short leash and that Robbie Ashford's ceiling is way higher. I will say this. I covered Robbie in high school at Hoover. He was an unbelievable talent. Obviously went to Oregon and when quarterbacks go out of state or when they go out of the SEC, sometimes you forget about what their career could look like. Like Bo Nix is, out west now and nobody watches the Pac-12, so nobody cares. So, but when you have a guy come back like Robbie Ashford and make the impact that he has, he's an in-state guy. He's exciting to watch. The last time that Auburn was super successful was when they had a dual threat quarterback that was a controlled dual threat quarterback. Tom, how crucial can that be to the Auburn offense and what they're looking to accomplish in an SEC West that is talented defensively?
Yeah, no, I think it can be very helpful, especially when you still have a little bit of questions about the offensive line, even though there's a lot of veteran presence on the offensive line. That's been a unit that has been very, criticized and put under the microscope the last several years. And, the misses on the recruiting trail and all that stuff have been well documented. But, when you have an offensive line that, right now is breaking in 2 new starters, including one at center, you have an relatively unproven wide receiver core and an inexperienced wide receiver core. Having a quarterback who can run and move the pocket a little bit can be really helpful to, provide a little bit of a jolt to the offense.
Sure.
But what Auburn wants to do though still is, this is a pro style offense with spread elements. Brian Harsin has typically worked with drop back passers, guys like TJ Finley. That's why, when they signed Robbie Ashford, it was a little bit of a, I wonder what they're going to do here because, he doesn't exactly fit the mold of what Brian Harsin has typically done. But there have been instances in Brian Harsin's career, specifically 2017 when he was at Boise State, where he used kind of a 2 quarterback system like this, where one guy was more of a runner and one guy was more of a passer, kind of provided a change of pace, help things out, especially if one guy starts to struggle a little bit, you have another guy that you can turn to. When he was an offensive coordinator at Texas, he used 2 quarterbacks in 2011 too. And 2019 at Boise State, he had to rely on 3 different quarterbacks, though that situation was a little bit different because it was due to injuries. So he knows how to manage this situation and try to maximize it. When, dual quarterback systems, you don't often see a lot of success because, the old adage is, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none.
Yeah.
But, Brian Harsin has shown that he knows how to manage this. And, his philosophy is if he feels that he has 2 guys that can help this team on the field, he's going to find a role for them. So I'm just curious to see how that plays out moving forward. He said this week, don't expect a 50-50 split just because we're going to use 2 guys. But there's going to be situations where they're going to turn to Robbie Ashford and situations where they're going to entrust TJ Finley with running the offense. And I think it's going to just kind of vary week to week as we get closer to the meat of the schedule.
Spoken like a true Auburn beat writer here. Tom has done his research on Brian Harsin, what he's done previously with 2 quarterback systems. Tom, it seems like the ground game is going to be a strength for Auburn. Should the offensive line continue to mold, should they continue to gel and succeed throughout the season? What did you see from the run game at Jordan-Hare Stadium last week? Obviously, Tank Bigsby was impressive in moments. A lot of these guys, it feels like it can add a kind of a new dynamic to this offense that is needed to maybe take some pressure off the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can rush for almost 300 yards and 5 touchdowns, you're going to feel pretty good about how things are looking in that aspect of the game. And Auburn made, no bones about it in the offseason. They want to be a run-first team. They want Tank Bigsby to be the foundation of this offense because he is a special talent. He's probably one of the most talented running backs to come through Auburn in the last, 15, 20 years. He's right up there with guys like Trey Mason and Kerryon Johnson and, Rudy Johnson, those guys. And he looked great in the opener. I mean, he rushed for almost 150 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 16 carries, I think it was. He averaged like 9 yards per attempt. He looked a little bit more explosive than he did at times last season. I know that's something that, there was kind of a drop off for him from his freshman to his sophomore year. I know he worked on that a lot in the offseason, spent a lot of time in the summer in the Atlanta area with former Auburn running back Brad Lester doing a lot of training there. And I think it showed early on. But, him and Jarquez Hunter, they were a really good 1-2 punch in the backfield there. Hunter did not have as many touches. He only had 8, but 3 of them went for touchdowns, including one that was 19 yards and then two more, short yardage touchdowns for him. TJ Finley after the game said it wasn't even a 1-2 punch. It was a 1-1 punch because that's how confident they are in both of them. I think we're going to continue to see Tank Bigsby be that, featured back with, Jarquez Hunter's kind of the change of pace guy to keep them fresh. Because that's what you're going to need when you're facing a schedule like this, especially when it's difficult as Auburn's. You're going to need to keep those running backs healthy and fresh late in the season. So, some games you might see, more of a closer split between the two. And there's going to be some games where they're just going to lean on Tank Bigsby because that's who they think he is. They believe that he is that guy that can carry them to a win. And, as long as they can continue to build on this run game, I think it's going to make life a little bit easier on those quarterbacks too.
Tom, all great points there regarding the run game. Auburn right now more than a 3-touchdown favorite against San Jose State. Kickoff at 6:30 tonight on ESPNU. If you're going into a game that should be considered maybe an easy win, maybe not as easy as last week, but a win regardless, what is the goal? What is Brian Harsin saying in the locker room to his guys when it comes to expectations and what he is hoping to see executed tonight at Jordan-Hare Stadium?
Yeah, when you have kind of games like this early in the season, they're kind of, tune-up games basically for once you hit the meat of that schedule. I think Brian Harsin put it best the other day, and he said this plenty of times, he has respect for the opponent, but it's not about the opponent this week. It's about Auburn and what they can do. And, he wants to see his team improve from week 1 to week 2 to week 3 to week 4. He thinks those are one of the biggest improvements a team can make come.
Sure.
So for Auburn, offensively, you obviously want to cut back on the interceptions and the turnovers in general. You want to see, just good, solid execution from that offense. I think he's going to want to see some of those younger receivers step up and see what they can do, before the competition ramps up. And defensively, there's a couple of areas that, he was really harping on this week. The secondary, I think Mercer only completed like 58% of their passes, but he wants to see them, compete and challenge for more of those balls when they're up in the air. I think they're going to have a chance to do that against, the San Jose State team this weekend. And the other one is just the pass rush. Auburn came into the season, they returned their top 3 pass rushers and Derek Hall, Eku Leota, and Colby Wooden. They feel really good about those guys. Derek Hall and Eku Leota both talked, throughout the offseason of, their goal for each of them is to get double-digit sacks. They want to kind of, make a run at Nick Fairley's single-season sack record of 11.5 from 2010. And, you get to the opener against a Mercer team that, frankly was overmatched. It's an FCS opponent.
Sure.
You only get one sack and 5 hurries.
Yeah.
Part of that was just the way Mercer ran its offense, kind of getting its quarterback out of the pocket, kind of moving the pocket a little bit, running a little bit more play action to give him a little bit of time. But they want to do a better job of getting home. They missed some opportunities for some sacks there. I think they're going to have some chances this weekend to kind of improve those numbers. San Jose State is more of a traditional drop back passing attack. They gave up 7 sacks to Portland State, which is an FCS team last week. So I think there's going to be an opportunity here for Auburn's defensive front to really feast. I think Brian Harsin wants to see them capitalize on that.
Great stuff, Tom. Appreciate your insight and, of course, all of your knowledge. Super impressive when it comes to Auburn, their opponents, and everything around the SEC. Let's talk about the SEC really quick. Games to watch out for. Alabama going to kick things off. I know everyone's going to have eyes on that because Auburn's going to kick off till 6:30. So some games around the SEC. Bama, Texas, 11 o'clock. Later on in the day, it's Tennessee and Pitt. That's going to be a good one, a top 25 matchup. The Vols are ranked 24th in the country. Kentucky and Florida going head-to-head this evening. You can tune in for that at least for 30 minutes until you tune things over to Auburn. Tom, when you look at some things around the SEC, anything that sticks out to you when going into week 2 of the season?
Yeah, I think the one that I'm probably most curious about is that Kentucky-Florida game. I obviously won't get much of an opportunity to watch it with Auburn playing at about the same time, but I
Yeah.
think those are just two programs where Kentucky's been on the rise for a while, wondering if when they're going to be able to kind of break through and get to that next level, and Florida what they can do coming off that really impressive win against Utah that kind of vaulted them up the polls. Obviously Billy Napier's got a little bit of a rebuild job to do there at Florida. So I'm really curious to see just how far and how quickly he can get them coming along.
Good stuff. Looking forward to it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into the Auburn pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. The Tigers will kick things off this evening on the Plains against San Jose State. One kind of final tune-up for the Week 3 game against Penn State, the one that lots of folks are looking forward to. They have circled on the calendar. Tigers are at home for the entire month of September. So, of course, Auburn fans are enjoying that. But enjoy this one today, 6:30. Have a little bit of time. Go get you some coffee, get you some breakfast, enjoy the early games, and hang out. Don't get too crazy before 6:30. But y'all enjoy the game this evening, and we will see you in the post-game show. Again, thanks for tuning in. This has been the Auburn pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. For Tom Green, I'm Simone Eli. We will see y'all tonight.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.